All right, so today we're going to cover this topic that is very near and dear to my heart, which is geospatial time series data, where we're overlaying time series data, one that looks at either position, so looking at something change over time along a positional dimension, in addition to looking at it on a map. And so what you're seeing here, and sorry to reiterate to people on training, just because I started recording this, but on top we're seeing the aggregate sum, and then on the bottom we're seeing the actual case outbreaks where a dot is showing, and the size of the dot is the size of the outbreak in that location. It's only over a certain threshold that it's being shown. And so in a way, what you're able to do is see sort of the specificity of where this outbreak is occurring, in addition to the aggregate sum of the overall increases during this time. So this was March of 2020 through till I think, yeah, looks like end of July of 2020. So, or 2021, sorry. And so there was still a lot more to fill in as we could probably do next year. And then one other just brief example of geospatial data that's not necessarily time series, but allows you to show sort of multiple dimensions at once is this one that is looking at the number of children in each state that basically need childcare. So I'm not going to go too far into detail on this, but this is what we call hierarchies. And I think attaching hierarchies to geospatial information is also quite interesting in that you can aggregate things up. So this is the national level, 23.7 million children under the age of 6, but yet then you can go down to the state level, 1.4 million in Texas. And then of that, a different percentage, I think, that's, the county level is the purple. And so with all this, it's trying to layer information and build sort of a better mental model. And I think we all sort of have an innate sense of maps, and that's basically for what we're basing this off of. We're using our understanding of where things are geospatially and then overlaying other information. So to do that for today, what we're going to do, and I'll jump through this quickly and then we'll go back on a more individual basis. But if you can follow along with me at this speed, go for it, but I'm going to go quick this first time. So what we're going to look at is life expectancy. And to get to that life expectancy data, just so I'll start over here, just so everyone can see from a fresh slate. Let's add a swarm and choose from library and choose the global life expectancy data. And so from here, we're seeing the data load in, and this data by default is showing year, country, life expectancy combinations for, I think it's like 40 or 50 countries around the world, and some other information. So yeah, we're going to start with that and start to plot it both on a map, but also show it sort of in a variety of different ways. So one of the first things we could do is sort of a more typical example, which is creating a scatter plot. We'll put the year on the x-axis, and on the height axis, we're going to put life expectancy. So here we go, sort of the very base thing I start all the time. And I'll add a color scheme in here that's based on the region. And sorry, is there a question? Oh, okay. And so let me do one additional thing, which is to throw out the depth axis, and we'll throw that out based on the continents. And so actually, let me change this color to consonant as well, sorry. And so this is sort of the main shape I show over and over, where we can see basically each of these countries starting to increase in life expectancy, but it's pretty hard to discern the individual countries. They're all sort of layering on top of one another. And so is there a way to visualize this where we can see it over a map? And so let's just do a few small things here. Let's add some connections. So we're going to connect the countries together. And this is sort of the prototypical starts. And a lot of our demos sort of start this way. But let's go from this step now and actually layer it onto a map. And it's actually much easier than you might anticipate. But there's one key element here that sort of always throws people off, or is sort of the hardest part to get. It is that each of these dots is being put in a position based on these parameters right here in this chart options type. But there's also a section called additional dimensions. And within there are basically the same controls that are called micro offsets. And so you have the same width, height, and depth dimensions that you can define that are moving a dot based on those attributes. So you can basically recreate this scatter plot using just additional dimensions. And why that's important is that when we layer it over a map, we're no longer using this chart type. We're just going to use additional dimensions. So in order to do this, what I'll do is basically put all the dots into one dot. And to do that, I'm just going to put it on random and then put this all to 0. So that there's literally just one position for every single dot in all of this. And then to recreate it using additional dimensions, I'm going to use on the width axis that same time series data. So we're using year on the width axis, where I'm going to go from 0, or actually, sorry, minus 0.5 meters to 0.5 meters away from the origin, looking from 1815 to 2020. And then along the height axis, we are going to put the life expectancy. So just like before, we'll go from 0 to 1, and let's go from 0 to 100 in terms of life expectancy. So what we've done essentially, and there is the depth axis, I'm going to skip that, or I'll keep that for now. Let's just do it real quick. And so on this part, we'll do the continent 0 to 1, or sorry, minus 0.5 to 0.5. Okay, so if I go from this step to this step, the only thing that changed, oh, that's right. So for height, I also need to go minus 0.5 to 0.5. And that's because it's the offset from the origin, which is 0, 0, 0. And so moving from this step to this step, essentially nothing changes. There's a slight variance, it looks like, on the depth, but we'll get to that in a sec. But essentially, we've recreated the scatter plot here just using an additional dimensions. And so what we can do with this is actually start to layer it over a map now. So I'm going to turn off the depth dimension because we don't need that attribute for its position. And instead of using a random plot now, let's actually start to use a map. So I'll jump over to map to regions, and you'll notice it says using map, and there's nothing to pull down. So we actually have a button here for create map, or I can go over to the object timeline over on my left and click this plus button to create a map. So this by default creates a sphere, a globe of the world, and we can now layer this over if we want. I'm going to make the map just a little larger. So I'm going to make this 3 meters. So it's going to be quite large in the space. And then on this, I'm going to go back to the swarm and basically say use map 1 and use the region called country. And so on each country now, we are going to overlay this time series data that basically shows this arc over time. And they're all sort of moving in the wind in some sense as you scroll around. I do think that for things like this, because you can't have everything go in one direction on a sphere, it's impossible to have everything go in a straight line, that we do recommend oftentimes starting with more of a flat map or an equirectangular or a Mercator projection of the world. So I'm going to make this 4 meters wide here. And so now we'll see that same data set, and it's overlaid on the map here where they intersect. And you can sort of see that movement. And the reason it's below the map, just to maybe illustrate that a little further, is because, let me duplicate this step, is because in additional dimensions on the height axis, we're going from minus 0.5 to 0.5 meters. So I could very well just set this to 0, and then that will place the 0 life expectancy at the map level. So then we're looking above the map. So anyways, a lot more we could do here. One such thing is probably to make this a lot shorter so that it's less minus 0.1 to 0.1. So they're a little stubbier. I think often makes it a little easier to interpret. So things like that can be impactful. So there's actually a lot more things we could start to do with this. One thing I'm just going to quickly show, but not expect to see as many people doing this, is to start to use point per value as opposed to point per row. And just to illustrate what that means and what you can do with it, I'm going to turn off basically the first swarm completely, and I just have a duplicate here on the second step. And on this, what I'm going to do is changes from point per row to point per value. And I'm going to use life expectancy as the value. So now every time, if there's, it's the average life expectancy is 70 and 1 year country combination, it's going to create 70 dots for that, that row. And so we end up with a lot more dots, but right now they're all on top of one another. And so it's what you could do here is, instead of positioning them by using micro offsets, in one of the last courses, what we did was started to stack on a map. And so what you can do with that is, as opposed to using the height offset for life expectancy, we're just going to stack them, because it's just like we have, a bunch of dominoes and we're just stacking them on top of one another. That's essentially what we're doing. And so to do that, there's a lot of ways to do this, but the easiest way is just to literally click this button called stacks. And that's sort of a shortcut to creating this. And by default, it's going to add the dispersion. And I apologize, it did actually take off the micro offset for width. So I'm going to turn that back on, and that should space them out by year. So now we essentially have recreated the same visual, but instead of one series of dots that is showing a line, we are now actually stacking the dots individually on top of one another to recreate the same thing. And there's actually quite a lot more you could start to do with that that I think is kind of interesting and exciting. But I just want to quickly show that, just because it's something we've been exploring a lot more, point per value, and I think has like a lot of opportunity. And then just because I'm sort of rolling with it, just to show one last view, not of this point per value, but instead still point per row. But instead of using positional space as the additional dimension here, what we could use is on the height dimension, we'll use year. So now we're going from 1850 to 2020, extended from the map. And we could change instead the size of the dots based on something like life expectancy, the thing we were looking at before. And so it is a linear gradient between them, but now we're using size to basically show the change in life expectancy. Not as dramatic necessarily, but especially if you filter out, it can actually be quite an impactful way to show it as well. So lots of ways to basically skin the cat and do a lot of these different elements. And so I think that's why it's so ripe for opportunity in terms of being able to layer these information sets over one another in a more dynamic way. So let me pause there and first just see what questions you have. I know that's probably definitely more of an advanced topic here, but hopefully that was you're able to follow along with me for that. So let me open it up for any specific questions, and then I'd love to start to dive in and try to coach you guys one-on-one to recreate some of this.
Is it possible to kind of play through the time dimension as an animation, for example? How is that? Yeah, that's the question.
No, great question. So there's a few ways to do it. So in terms of showing something animate over time, the basic way to do it is to basically create the end step, which is, this is at the end of it, what I want it to look like, duplicate it. So now we have the same step twice, basically one after another.
Okay.
And on the first step, then apply a filter. So we go down into filters and apply a filter so that we eliminate basically the time up until the very beginning of it. So there's different ways you could do that, but the easiest way is just to add a filter for the year in this case. And so By default, it's putting the range in here. And so I'll just say from that range to 1850. And it filtered it down, but you'll notice that it filtered it down and put it in the center, which can work. I mean, this definitely can work. But if you want it to stay in its position, there's a little checkbox here that says hide filtered categories. And by unchecking that, it will keep it at the beginning. And so now if I play this forward, it's going to basically, oops, sorry, I have to turn it off on the second step too. My apologies. Give me just a moment. All right, I'm gonna save and refresh, which if you ever see something odd, like we just did, save and refresh, Control S, Control R, and what that does is just resets the scene in case there was any sort of difference between what the preview window is showing and what's actually being rendered in the flow itself. So just a quick tip here, but so now if I go from this step to this step, it looks like it's going crazy. So let's do some debugging here all together. Okay. So what's going on? Let's see. On filters, we have no filter. All right, no filter. Going from the correct. Okay. There is a chance that that is a bug. So I'm going to follow up with you on that one specifically.
Hey, no problem.
That's odd behavior.
I wonder, can we do something analogous on, say, on the map view? Imagine you played through time, and if you did the stacking, of point per value, and you could watch their little tubes per country get taller. Do you see what I mean? Is that something you can do? Can you play through the time dimension on this?
Right. Yeah. No. So a couple ways to do it. So one way I've done it in the past is the thing to change is actually to keep this whole visualization static, but instead duplicate the map layer and use the second copy of the map as basically a way to move it over time. And so if I take the position of this second map, apply it to all steps, and go from this first step where it's in front of it.
Are you literally shoving all those pipes through the second map so they appear to be growing? Okay.
That's exactly right. It's kind of a trick way to do it.
That's one way to do it. I was not expecting that to go that way, but I do get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of an easier way, or
no, easy is good.
Yeah, a little easier to manage without having to add a filter or anything like that. And so then, yeah, you're going from, well, I guess you'd probably want to go the opposite direction. So switch these steps in step details. So if we go from this step forward to that step, let's add a little bit more time here. By going into step details, you can update the animation time between steps. And so now if I go from this step to the next, it will go over 6 seconds and animate through. And I'd probably want to switch the direction. I think this is going small to big in terms of years. So 1850 is here and 2020 is there. So I'd likely want to switch the order there. And that would be done within additional dimensions here. And that's basically the offset is going from 0 to 0.5 meters above. So going from 1850 to 2020, I can just swap these to say 2020 to 1850. And it basically should flip these around.
Thanks for indulging me. I see. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Let me save and refresh this. I didn't see it update right away. So let me double check there.
It's always good to see, good save hygiene, I guess.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. Let's do an easy one to test. Okay. Okay, so it's still showing that direction. Why is that? Let me just see one thing. I guess it's not letting it. So this might be another thing we'll have to double check, but you could also switch it this way, which is to say from 0.5 to 0, which I guess is the right way to do it. But I don't think it's changing the min and max for the range, but just for this. So I don't know if you followed that, but if instead of switching the range min and max, which is what I was doing earlier, I'm changing the min and max of the offsets, and that will do it. So 0.5 to 0 as opposed to 0 to 0.5, and that will switch the order. So now this is animating over time in the correct manner.
And there they go. Yep.
Yeah.
What if you wanted to do a say some sort of calculation, like you just wanted to see instead of the absolute, sort of just the change, between all countries over the entire. This wouldn't be an animation this time, maybe, but yeah, maybe you would drag yourself through it.
Yeah. So that's one.
Can you create a calculated field in your data? What do you do?
Yeah, great question. So we don't have the ability to create calculated fields yet. It's actually very close to being there. But one thing where it will be when it's ready is within the data set. If you click this edit/re-upload button, it brings you into the data sets, and you actually have a lot more capabilities within this to do aggregation or grouping, as well as averaging and sorting and all of that. So if I click on this, by default, it will sort it ascending or descending based on what you're selecting. So that works for sorting. And then the thing to show is sort of like a calculated field by creating a hierarchy where if I say like the region or the continent is at the top level of the hierarchy, then what I could do is look at the average life expectancy. So now I'm looking at the average life expectancy for this whole continent, and that's made up of all of the subcomponents. So it is a way to create layers of information that are calculated and quite relevant. So continent, I could also drop down here and add region and then country, etc. So it's a way to sort of separate this out even further. So that's one type of calculation, but for what you're describing, you would need to do it in the original data sets
and then import it with that already there. Okay.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense. Yeah, I was kind of imagining a calculated field, but it's same diff, right? Some low. This isn't like a terabytes of data or anything.
Right.
What if you wanted to? And do you mind me just spitballing here? Is this irritating?
No, I think it's great. But if is there any other JD, Paulo, or if you guys have any other questions, feel free to interject. But yeah, this is great.
What if you wanted to... I just wanted to say real quick that maybe you'll hear us mentioning variables from time to time. That's a functionality that's kind of right around the corner, and it's not next week, but it could be like 2 months from now. And that having variable control over a lot of these processes within Flow will enable us to automate these kinds of things that we're talking about right now.
Okay, that's actually very promising. It's nice to know the roadmap, right? But I also understand like all plans are soft in software engineering, so I get it. What if you wanted to do like a choropleth about like which countries are experiencing like the most growth or the absolute change, like over this time, could that be done?
So you'd have to once again take the data set and find just the one value per continent, I believe. But I think actually, let me just think out loud here.
Just for fun, what if we took the time off and just wanted to do a choropleth of Of
So I
just
believe
like,
what
so life expectancy with some color range, color ramp in 1850. I don't know.
yeah, let's do
That's
it.
not what we're doing tonight, I know, but
Yeah, and the way to do that is exactly in that same spots. So what I did is duplicated that first swarm. So it's down here
I'm not seeing
as a
your,
separate.
I'm seeing
I'm
you.
sorry. There we
Yeah.
go.
Oh, there we go. Ah.
So let me do this over again. So let me delete this. So what I'm doing is on this step, I'm duplicating the swarm. And on this second swarm, what we're going to do is click on that edit re-upload button. And we're going to create a snapshot. That's essentially what we're going to do. But the thing you had mentioned is filtering. So let's filter the year so it's equal to 1850. And the difference between adding a filter this way and the other filter you saw is that by creating a snapshot with this filter, it's as if the data was that way when you loaded it in. And so it will only look at that piece of information, essentially. That's the only thing it can do. And so if I select snapshot 1, there will only be one value here per country.
Yeah.
The other data points are not there. And so why that's important is that for the map, the chloropleth needs to pull from one data points.
Makes sense. No, I
so
see.
the life expectancy here, we know the region is the country, and we want to scale the values using the country, the value of life expectancy. Yeah. But you'll notice there's not another delimiter to say like in the year 1850, that was necessary to do at the swarm level to say at this, to create the snapshot. So the data is just at 1850.
Okay.
And so what this should do is then update, oh, sorry, snapshot 1, there we go. And, oh, that's right. I have that map in the back. My apologies. So that was the map I had moved behind.
All right, I'm sorry. I was wondering, I'm like, okay, so.
Yeah, that was
so it turns out everybody
for a
sucks
second
uniformly in 1850. Maybe we should have picked a year with more variation. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's yeah, we can do that easily. So let's just go here and
or like really intensify your color ramp, you know.
Yeah, or another thing to potentially do, and
you could choose 1918 Spanish pandemic. There might be some interesting variation there.
Oh, good thought, Bill. So snapshot 2 coming up.
Yep, I'm actually I'll just keep it snapshot 1 and just update this one. But you could do exactly what you're describing and create a second snapshot to do that with as well. And yep. So
we get more variation there.
Yeah, it's more, but
yeah.
pretty
And so part of it is the color range, we're going from red to green, and it's going from 6 to 96. Yeah. Whereas I believe in this range,
what if we went from like 38 to 40, right?
but there's no record in there of value 96, is there? I mean, you could
maybe probably, it was that can't be
change that to 50 or something or 60.
Right. Yeah. So you'd want to make it more the min and max of that localized. Yeah, something like that. But
and then we would also obviously, if we were just looking at the choropleth, we'd want to make the orbiting the satellite dots go away, you know, the ones that are on the dimension of point in space by height.
Right.
I'm trying to remember are those just on the other map, or are they?
Yep. So they were on this one. So
okay, so you just sort of
and so to turn the visibility, there's a little eye icon that will show up, and that's sort of like a video editing software.
No, I get it. Yep. It's I know these are a little bit silly questions, but
no,
sometimes you spend a long time looking for the eye button, if you know what I mean.
Hey, Michael, just for the heck of it, why don't you put 1942 as your year filter there?
Sure.
Just want to see what that looks like. We might see some countries like.
I have to say, it's quite. I would expect the Soviet Union to have taken a bit of a hit after the 30s.
Right.
And then the war.
Yeah.
So let me go with the choropleth.
Yeah, do you want to pin your session so we're always looking at you, Michael?
Can do that. So this is updated now.
Is that 1942?
It is, yes.
Okay.
And you can make it if you want to see more radiation. If you put them closer to one another in some sense.
There we go. That, yeah, sort of
Yeah,
intensify
where
the
you
range, right?
yeah, exactly. You're basically like making it more of a threshold.
Because
Yeah.
at
So
some point
there's
we might
different
clip.
ways to sort
At
of,
some point we might be clipping the data, right? But at least we're seeing some variation within the
right.
range.
Yeah.
Is there a way to say bucket these ages? What if I want to see? So instead of a smooth gradient, right? What if I wanted a color per
Right.
bucket? You know what I mean?
I do. So we are working on creating color bins. So
There you go.
basically being able to
Bin, not
bin
bucket.
an attribute that is a number or an integer, integer or a number into bins. So really important for histograms and a variety of other things,
Yes,
including what you're
exactly.
describing. So
Yep.
so yeah, that is to come. It basically has to do with creating categories from numbers, more or less. So
Yep. No,
it's not here yet, but it's in the works for a release here soon.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad to be here at the birth of all the things. It's really an impressive tool, but yeah, it's everything's a bigger everything's bigger
Yeah,
than you think it's going to be.
yeah, and
So
that's sort of why we're doing these drop-ins. It's just to hearing your questions and seeing what you're, this is definitely an advanced topic, I'd say, but just in terms of the questions you're coming up with, I definitely have had the same questions as I've been building. It's always iterative. You get to a spot and you want to try this and you try that and you try this and you try that and you sort of see what works.
Yeah, how can I make this tell a story with like, sort of minimize the noise and maximize the information value, and sometimes bins help with that, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to try one last thing here just to see if we can do it. So I'm going to create a new snapshot by clicking the create snapshot button.
Okay.
And then in this snapshot, I'm going to remove this filter. And the reason being is that I want to actually aggregate this by country. And then I'm going to look at the, we'll just look at the average life expectancy for each country.
Over that whole period.
And so that way, when I go in here for the map, if I tell it to use snapshot 2, it's going to be just a second. This is a little bit more experimental when I'm
sure
trying right now.
You're flying live. It's a live demo. It's brutal, and you do this like twice a week, right?
That's true. That is true. I just
you
want
do
to
a
make sure
matinee as well, or is it?
Okay, I don't think it's working as expected. It's my anticipation here.
It could be that that average over the whole period tends to go to some central. There's a very small slope between the highest and the lowest. The average life expectancy over 170 years.
And I think I know what's happening. Let me just double check. Okay, so I think I know what's going on. Maybe I don't.
JD and Paolo, please don't let me use up all your time.
Oh no!
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to figure that one out.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll have to think about this one a little bit more. Chloroplasts are definitely a.
One thing I did want to ask, I'm a I guess as a beginner, I found when I was like just opening up the editor, I went to open it up, and then I realized, oh wow, there's so much that I can do, and then I froze.
Yeah, the blank sheet problem.
And it was just like writing an essay, and I was just like, wow, I'm here again. So like, how do you, I guess the best thing to do is maybe have an idea, but if I'm just there and I'm just sort of like looking at everything and I just freeze like that, let's I guess if I have this idea, but I don't know how necessarily I want to portray it yet, is there I guess something that I can use to help me like figure out like, oh wait, well, I have this data set or I have this information. Maybe I can explore it this way. Like,
Yeah. So my recommendation is that is to start with sort of known entities and then build out from there. So, you know, step one is just like almost recreate just a line graph, and then add one additional dimension or add it on top of a map. And sometimes I find that iterative work to be sort of the most revealing, where you see things that work and things that don't. And just one small tweak can make a big impact. You know, one such tweak that I think very unexpected at the time was this one that it's more of like a heat map. And I don't know if if featured anymore. It might be. See if I can pull it up. And this is definitely one that was sort of, I feel like it was almost by accident, but you know, it's basically a histogram of, or a heat map of information. So you could see something similar if you were to use just color on an Excel sheet and just look at the histogram, but this is revealing it using height as opposed to.
Can you present?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not actually
That's
showing.
okay.
There we go. There we go. So so this is essentially a histogram comparing objects to one another, and so this would typically be represented as an Excel sheet, and you'd see color green versus red to show like the heights, and by showing it this way, I thought it was pretty interesting, actually. You could see it quite clearly. So I don't know why that jumped to mind, but it was definitely one of the ones that was very unexpected results from what we started with. And so I find that a lot of times, you know, what's kind of amazing is that there's just a crazy number of ways to represent just this global life expectancy data, that you could really actually iterate a crazy amount on this one in a multitude of ways. Yeah, so I'd focus on, to sort of bring it back, and that's more, I guess, on the experimental side. I think the most important aspect is like the story or what is the insight you're trying to convey and who's the audience that you're trying to convey it to. And starting there is often the answer is much simpler. And I think that often is the most important thing to remember. It's like, how do I get to that key insight? And there's ways to do that where you see the big picture and then you drill down to it, or you start drilled in and then you zoom out and see the bigger picture. And I think either of those is a valid way to sort of frame it. Yeah, so I don't know if that directly, I don't know if I fully answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's just sort of a writer's block kind of thing for me. Like I look at the globes and my mind all of a sudden goes to that kind of information, and then I sort of like tell myself, oh well, I can't use the data that I have, that kind of map. And so there's all these things that just like during the process, I'm just like battling with myself. So
no, you're right. It's possibly trying to, you know, and I'd say definitely using that global life expectancy data, definitely use that to start. Because half the battle sometimes is just messy data and wrangling the data and more of that than the actual visualization aspect of it. So that eliminates one big step. And the other thing I'd also recommend is we have our Discord server that we more recently started, but if you just post there that, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, I don't know how to do it, I'll definitely respond. And I think more people are going to start chiming in with different ideas. But, you know, I think we can all learn from one another. And you know, if you have an idea, even if it's just super raw and then, you know, just you know, don't know how to do it or what it could be, but you know, I'm happy to riff off of that. And I think other
Cool.
people
Is it
will probably
called,
find interesting too.
Is it called Flow Immersive?
It is called, it is, yes.
Discord.
I can send an invite here from it. So
And I guess while you're searching, so that I can fill down time. Before we all go, I just want to confirm, because I wanted to send you a link and see what you thought of a video idea.
great.
If I wanted to confirm if your email address is michael@flow.gl. Is that it?
Yep, that's right.
And that's okay to send the link to?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. Awesome.
Awesome.
Cool. And I put the Discord link in the chat window, and I probably should send another email reminder out about that. Probably be helpful, because yeah, I think you know, we all will get better as the community gets better. So
I am in there, and I see the welcome and the roles and rules. Are there any other specific places I should be looking?
Yeah, so the one thing about Discord is there's like another step to do after you get in, which is to basically acknowledge the rules. And so if you click on roles and rules, you'll have to click the green checkbox in order to then be revealed to everything else.
I've only ever been in family and friends Discords. You know what I mean? So yeah, I get it. Well, okay.
Now we're sort of learning too,
no. Now the world is, yeah, I can always ask my 27-year-old daughter, who is, and frankly, I'm just noticing she's on right now.
No way. I love that.
She's playing Valorant, so it never ends.
So
nice.
All right, but no, now the world is complete. I see a lot of stuff.
Yeah, should be a lot more sections there.
General data stories, nice. Guides and tutorials, yes, please, more of that.
Yeah, so we'll try to keep posting more and more there. So yeah, definitely feel free to post there, and we can help you guys all along. But yeah, thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you very much.
I know I meant to make this a little more interactive and have you guys do it with me, and I went off a bit on a tangent and got a little deep. So apologies for not coming back down to earth there, but hopefully it was still interesting. And I think the questions you were asking, Thomas, were really spot on.
I learned a lot. Thank you for doing this.
Actually, Thomas, do you have about 30 more seconds? I'll show you something that I think fits into what you're talking about with Core Plus. Let me just share my screen here real quick. Okay. And I'll promise I'll be fast here. Okay. Yeah, so this is the flow that I actually used in training. Is that showing up okay now?
Has started screen share. Oh, here we go. Pop. It's here.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this is a choropleth. It colors the countries based on the population. Okay. And the smallest country has a population of 1 million, and the largest 1,398 million. That's China. So in this scheme, China and India are by so far the most populous countries in the world, that they grab all the red upper end, and everybody else is fighting for shades of yellow and light orange. Okay, just because they're so much bigger than the others. So so that's a fact if you're scaling this way. But in this next step, what I used that bucket concept that you talked about, and I put the top 10 countries of the world in the red bucket, or a value of 5. So here I'm getting a variation of 1 to 5, much less than 1 to 1398. Okay.
It really shows you how populous some of the African countries are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So this gives you a better.
Nigeria is not a small country population-wise.
Yeah, which one?
I think that's Nigeria, the pinky one right there in the
Yeah, Nigeria.
That's a big country.
Yeah, population-wise.
Population-wise, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah, and I didn't realize that Mexico was one of the top 10 countries in the world population-wise.
Brazil checks out.
Yeah,
but yes, Mexico, yeah.
Yeah, so this improves the choroplething. And then if you absolutely want to,
you did the manual binning somewhere in your data set to say kind of group them. Is that right?
Yeah, right. I detected the 10 largest and gave them a value of 5 and the like. But then there's another scheme that we actually use fairly often, and sometimes the more important the colorization is, the more we use it. And that's to actually embed the colorization in the CSV file. Turns out it's really easy to do. It's very reliable. And
Oh, I think you actually talked about this yesterday, didn't you, as part of your demo? You weren't here, Bill, but I think Michael you may have put a few hex codes into or something into an Excel file.
Yeah, right. So I mean, that's how you get complete control. So here, you know, let's say for whatever reason, it was really important to me that I have complete control over the colors for each country. And now I can choose what colors I want. So I'm doing my own choroplething here, you know, and I just chose some very different colors. You know, it's probably not a very good palette. And we artistically, we probably wouldn't recommend these colors, but to illustrate the point that you
gets the point
control
across.
the color through the CSV file. That's a pretty common technique we use.
I actually did wonder when you were doing the gradients across a range in the detail controls on the right hand side there, you have a start and an end color, and I wondered, like, what if you wanted like more, you know, more points, and of course, it looks like if you wanted that, you can do that directly in the data set. If you want to have pinpoint control, which is sometimes you do, right? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I'm working on a project right now for the UN where colorization is really important to them, and there's like 50 colors that come into play.
Whoosh.
So, yeah, so you know, the best way to do that and get the kind of control that they want to have is by populating the colors through the CSV file.
It's like you're making a presentation for a bunch of mantis shrimp who can, you know, see more colors than any other, you know.
Yeah,
they have 14 different kinds of rods and cones, right?
Yeah, maybe it's not 50 colors, but it's 30 colors.
I'm like, yeah, that's a lot. No, that's a challenge. That is a challenge.
Yeah. So anyway, I just, you know, those are some techniques that turn out to be quite easy in Flow.
Thank you.
We do them pretty frequently.
Thank you both.
That was great.
I've kept you guys over time now, so
this is fun.
I guess I'll see you next week, or maybe I'll see you in Discord.
Yeah, have a good Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, you guys too.
Hey, thanks a lot, everybody.
Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.